This piece of Lisa is being brought to you by Mutual Security Credit Union. Find out more at mscu.com. Kathleen Flinn did an experiment. She's going to tell us all about it. She wrote a book called The Kitchen Counter Cooking School, which is about transforming people like you and me, culinary novices. I include myself in that. I'm just your ordinary home cook who tries to do something once in a while for the holidays, into a fearless home cook. And she will be appearing right tonight at R.J. Julia, my favorite bookstore in Connecticut, at 768 Boston Post Road up in Madison at, I think it says 7 o'clock. Kathleen, welcome to the Lisa Wexler Show.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm a fan of your show, actually. So lovely to be here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying so. Do you live in Connecticut?
No, but I have family who live here, and so I've heard it on and off, and they are fans of yours too. So thank you for having me.
Well, you're very, very welcome. Well, you've written a really interesting book. It's certainly not a typical cookbook, although it has recipes. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of insight and essays as well.
Yeah, I think it's, I was just reading a review about it today, and they said, it's part memoir and part social experiment and then part kitchen manual. And I think it's really interesting. I've been listening to the conversation today, and I think that one thing that people forget is that if you can't cook or you don't cook, you essentially leave yourself at the mercy of corporations feeding you. I mean, if you get up in the morning, you have a toaster pastry, and then you go have fast food, and then you go and you get a pizza from a huge national chain, or, you put something in the microwave that's, from another big company. I mean, I think that, it's really an interesting concept that we really allowed the most fundamental thing that we can do, which is to nourish ourselves and to nourish the people around us, to be taken over and to be taken away from us.
But even if you do cook, Kathleen, unless you're very choosy about your ingredients, you're already succumbing to, for example, let's say genetically modified foods, which may not always be a bad thing, but may sometimes be a bad thing, or hormone chicken breasts that you may buy, and even though you're cooking the breast, it's already been transformed before you even buy it.
And that's a great point too. And I think one thing I found in the course of the project, and which really actually started more from the concept of boxes. I mean, I think the closer you can get to real food, and be getting it in its whole form, whether it's a whole apple or a whole chicken or whatever. I mean, I think people always kind of go, I don't really go to Whole Food but and it's not just a store.
Okay. It's a philosophy.
I think the further you get away from boxes, I think the further how you move much closer to feeding yourself better. The way that this project actually started was because I was in my local grocery store, and I had just come back from Paris, where I had studied at the Le Cordon Bleu, and I didn't really know what to do with my culinary degree. And here I am thinking, wow, awesome, I'm a French-trained chef, and then I happen upon a cart that's filled with boxes and boxes and boxes of, and I use parentheses here, food, because there was no real food in it. I mean, it was things like, dried pasta mixes and jars of gravy and a lot of different kind of kits to help food, but no actual food. So I was so intrigued because I thought, wow, who could this cart belong to? And then somebody came to claim it, and it was just a very normal-looking woman and her daughter. I mean, so I thought, wow, I'm really interested in what else are they going to buy? I mean, if this is where they're, what they got so far. So I followed them through the store. Stalking, I think, is probably an appropriate term. I prefer observing, but stalking, I think, is appropriate. And I went down the frozen food aisle and, followed them as they bought pizza pretzel bites and toaster pastries and all kinds of different stuff, and then went back down through the cereal aisle and so on. And then we ended up in the meat department where, okay, it's been like 20 minutes and following her around. I think she felt comfortable enough to talk to me. So she said, oh, my goodness, can you believe how expensive boneless chicken breasts are these days? And I took the opportunity to say, hey, whole chickens are on sale. They're only 99 cents a pound. And she went, well, that's great, but I would have no idea what to do with the whole chicken.
Isn't that something? Wow. And I'll tell you something else. I have another philosophy about that, Kathleen, which is that I don't like the fact that we keep meat so cheap. I wish meat was expensive. It shows our disregard for life. As far as
and actually, I think that's a great point. I think it's a terrific point. In fact, it's a big one that I make in the book. And one thing that I really encourage people to do is to actually, if you're going to eat, say, chicken or beef or whatever, particularly chicken, to start with a whole chicken. Because one thing I found was that when people have to, say, get a whole chicken, and cut it up and then cook with it, there's something about that really reinforces to you that was an actual animal.
That's right.
Where I think when you buy boneless, skinless chicken breast, it could be tofu. I mean, you really have no idea where it came from. You're very disassociated from the fact that was once a living creature. And one thing I really advocate a lot is that, overall, I think in America we eat too much protein. I think this whole concept of protein has been really beaten into us. But the reality is that a serving of protein is 4 ounces. It's not an 8-ounce steak. It's not a 12-ounce, chicken breast, which is the average size for a commercial, poultry breast. It's 4 ounces. So eat, one thing I say is like, hey, eat the appropriate amount of protein and, just spend the same amount of money that you're spending on meat now, but just buy a better quality.
I have a question.
Really make a demand about it.
I'm chatting with Kathleen Flinn, the Kitchen Counter Cooking School, and she'll be at RJ Julia tonight at 7 o'clock in Madison, and do go. Kathleen, I have a question for you from a listener who's watching us on Ustream, where you can access the show at lisawexler.com and click right on and be one of the people that watch as well as listen. And he wants to know if you've ever seen a documentary called Forks Over Knives.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, I have.
Tell us about it, because I haven't seen it, so tell us about it.
You should watch it, Lisa, because I think it would have a big impact on you. It definitely has on me and on many people around me. My mother, for instance, it no longer eats any animal products or byproducts. I mean, she doesn't eat any, dairy or beef and so on. And it's really affected me and my husband that, we've radically cut back the amount of meat that we eat. And I think that when you do that, I mean, the concept of forks over knives is that there have been many studies, and it's kind of tied into what I talk about in the book as well, which is that, food can really be a solution or it can be part of the problem. So what you eat plays an extraordinary amount of influence in your health. And I think that's one thing we don't talk about enough in this country is we don't talk about home cooking. I mean, I think that we all have it within us. We have the ability to make good decisions, or we have the ability to make bad decisions. And there's been a lot of research that shows that if you cook and you cook regularly, you weigh less, you're healthier because you make better choices overall about your food. It's when we become less, how should I say, in control of what we're doing, because we're allowing, again, back to what I was saying earlier, like, you're just kind of thinking, wow, well, it's not worth my time to cook. Like, I'm too busy to cook. I don't have time to plan. I don't have time to figure out, to learn some fundamentals around cooking. And I think that all of those things lead to this kind of lack of confidence. I mean, people love the book Kitchen Confidential, but I mean, what we really need is we need confidence in our own kitchen, so that if we want to do something such as what's advocated in Forks Over Knives, which is essentially adopting a plant-based diet, that you have the tools and the skills to be able to do that and execute that.
Kathleen, I am really famous for my chicken soup, like no kidding. And I make a vat, and I make it about twice a year for a lot of people, because for Rosh Hashanah and for Passover, I have 25 to 30 people, and I really do it. And I make it at least not the day before I serve it, but the day before that. Okay, so in other words, so that I can take the fat off twice. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and it's a big vat of chicken soup, and I make the matzo balls separately, and I only put them in at the last minute because I know they can turn. All right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and I make my chicken soup by, it's chicken soup. It's chicken, and it's a big Spanish onion, and it's a tablespoon of salt, and I double that for the size of the vat. I do 2 chickens, 2 onions, and 2 tablespoons of salt, and it boils and boils and boils. That's stage 1. And then I throw in peeled, old-fashioned peeling carrots that we peel, and celery, and that's stage 2. And I add no other seasonings whatsoever except a little bit of fresh parsley at the end, and it is divine. I make the best chicken soup. I start with these great kosher pullets. It's beyond. This time around, my chicken soup turned.
And when you say turned, tell me what that means.
It means that nobody would go near the kitchen. It smelled bad. They said it smelled like cheese. Jonathan had to take the chicken soup and dump it in the backyard. Nobody would let me serve it. It smelled bad. And I did everything that I normally do. I refrigerated it overnight. I would never not refrigerate soup. It was covered. And the only thing that I could figure out, and I want to ask you if this makes any sense at all, is I went on Google, and Google said that chicken soup can turn sour if it's not cooled after it's heated properly. And all I'm thinking is maybe I put it into a refrigerator that had so much other food that it didn't cool down. But I don't really know. I didn't do anything differently than I do ever, and I had to throw away the soup. People were devastated. I was really upset.
Yeah, I bet. The other question I'd ask you is, did you cover it at a time earlier than you normally would have? Because actually when you cover soup and it's hot, that can actually have a big impact on it, and that's a very common way that, for instance, in commercial cooking, that you devastate chicken stock, is that it hasn't cooled properly, and then you put the lid on it. And
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah,
maybe I didn't want all that smoke in the kitchen. I could have, but if I covered it, I still left it on sim.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that you in terms of the cooling process, that it didn't get quite cool enough. The other thing is, did you use the same kind of chicken that you normally use? Sure,
and they were perfectly. I mean, I have the nuclear nose, Kathleen. I can smell rot. 2 days and 2 refrigerators away. So nothing was.
Wow.
I didn't start with anything that was in any way bad. But it turned. It turned.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I kind of go with your suspicions, because I think what happens is there's this concept called the danger zone. I don't know. Have you ever heard of that?
No, tell me.
Okay, so this is a great thing. Everybody who works in the health industry, food and service industry, has to know this, and it's called the danger zone. So food needs to stay out of the zone above 40 degrees Fahrenheit and below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So basically, food either needs to be hotter than 140 degrees or cooler than 40 degrees. It's kind of a generally acceptable range of.
Wait. You mean it either needs to be very hot or very cold?
Yes, that's basically right. If you're going to keep it, I mean, when you serve food at, say, room temperature, I mean, it has a pretty limited sort of lifespan. So when you don't get things that are hot, cold enough, or if they stay too long in what they call the danger zone, then why it's called the danger zone is because bacteria can multiply very rapidly. It's like sort of their Bermuda of like vacation hotspots. Like they love that space, particularly right around like 90 degrees.
Oh.
That, it's just like sort of, the space that we like as humans is actually, that's where they really feast, and they can really multiply. So I think that you're right. I think your suspicion is correct, and I think what happened was that your soup stayed in that danger zone too long. It didn't go from the hot to the cold fast enough.
I gotcha.
It's a very common problem, and something that home cooks don't learn enough, I think, is about fundamental sanitation. But you're right to throw it away, because if it tasted sour like that,
it's no good. Can't make anybody.